from all of us. Hello? Please find a seat and we're going to get going on the challenge. All right. 2 items I did. I got to put in a plug for these handle inserts, and I'm real big on the not rolling off the table or off your lathe, you know, the turning tool. Always inevitably lands up, tool, you know, tipped down on the concrete floor, and you got to resharpen it after you just sharpen it. Yep. So all it takes is just a little flat, you know, sanded right into that, and they don't roll. The other thing I want to say is rolling things on the your tailstock, on the live center for the tailstock. It's a 3/4 tin thread. These nuts are available at the hardware store. Just drill a hole with a Forstner bit and glue those in. And they're great because you can make all kinds of jam chucks and everything for them, for like if you're doing crush, grind, salt and pepper mills or all-in-one tabletop food seasoning systems. This holds any of the profiles on there perfectly and lines up every time. So 2 very handy homemade tools. Thanks. Okay, next. Okay. Wonderful. We'll make sure you get a ticket here. This junk here.
For a while, so I had a couple pieces of cedar that I thought, you know, those look like they should be turned into a hammer for whacking that which needs whacking in the shop that you're not supposed to whack with steel. So made that. A couple years ago, when I first started turning, I made a set of cup chucks for turning spheres with. So those are pretty handy. They're just made out of Bradford pear. And then this is the latest in tenderizing systems for the kitchen. I tested it out this past weekend on some chicken breast that I did cover with plastic. No, it's not going to get E. coli on you or anything. And it did a wonderful job in flattening those suckers flat. So this one, I believe, is, I think it's just maple. I was unidentified found wood. So anyway, fun stuff.
Good job.
I didn't have much room left in my bag tonight, so I brought something small. Turned the handle, turned the brass. Simple little hammer.
All right. Well, I made a couple of things. First, I got this from Mike last month, Badan, and I went to Home Depot. My wife needed a piece of dowel for something else, and I found a piece of maple curtain, or not curtain rod, but closet rod, and 2-inch diameter, pretty solid. So it's a little light. That's my only problem with it, but it turned nice, and it was already round, so it didn't take long to finish. And then I found on, I believe it's the Denton Woodturners YouTube channel, a fellow named Don Hawkins, I'm not sure. Anyway, I have the link if anybody's interested. It's a hollowing system that this obviously goes onto the lathe, to the bed, and this goes through there. This sits on the tool rest, and I used it yesterday for the first time. I finally got everything put all together. It worked really great. In fact, it worked a little too great. And it's my own fault. Well, obviously it's my own fault. It's not. Nobody else came in and did it to me, but I was trying to kind of shape the outside afterwards. And my next tool, which I actually went to Home Depot today, I'm going to take a piece of threaded rod and get a little cat toy laser and put a laser so I know how thick my wall is. So hopefully that won't happen again, but the tool itself works really well, and hopefully I'm going to get, I've built myself a forge that I hope will get this hot enough that I can bend it to put a little swan neck in it. But anyway, that's for another time.
Okay, I had borrowed Jim Lambie's Steady Rest to turn the epoxy pine cone because it had a lot of cracks in it, and it's a Nichols Steady Rest, and it's built like a German tank. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody might sell one on the internet. And I started looking, and I found the plans of building a Nichols style Steady Rest by J.D. Combs, and emailed him, told him I was getting ready to do it. He sent me a revised set of drawings that he made some changes on, so away I went. So the big key on this one is buying this at McMaster's. So this was $50. I got this at these parts by Metal by the Foot for like $13. Don Frank gave me these long bars for free, and then I happened to have the steel at home, and then Dave Stalling helped me get this all welded up, and he liked it so well. He said, "Hey, how about letting me have those plans?" And so you'll see his version too. But basically, I went to Goodwill and bought a cheap pair of rollerblades for $5, and so I have $5 wheels on here. So this is called the Cheap Skate Steady Rest.
Unfortunately, Rick didn't share his plans until after I'd already was well underway. Yeah, I was already done. I was already too late by then. I got a friend to roll this piece of 1-inch solid steel for me, welded onto the base, and then just welded and assembled the rest of it myself. The wheels are from Steve Center Advanced Tools up in Iowa, and these are the same ones that he uses on his Steady Rest. I should have just bought his Steady Rest, I guess, but I'm a sucker for a project. These, if anybody builds one and wants to use these industrial wheels, the center hole going through them is an odd size. It's not metric. It's not U.S. It's something Steve has to mill his receivers that these wheels go on. So I got a bronze inserts and made an arbor on the lathe, and then turned the outside of them down to the point where I could press them into the lathe, and the inside was half-inch centers or half-inch, so I could use half-inch bolts. Well, this I only have 3 in it, and my on my hollowing bar, I kept it off of this side just for the laser to stay out of the way and stuff. If I had it to redo, I probably would do 3 or do 4 instead of 3.
That's kind of Skinner's design, isn't it? So that you can have the laser out of the way.
Yeah.
That's why the top one is.
Right. So my laser arm would come down this side. My tailstock would be down here on it.
You just happen to have a friend that could roll that thing.
I did. Yeah.
Steady Rest night.
Yeah, it is. Carry these around, you're going to need to have some steady rest. Okay, like Rick said, he said, "Can you weld?" And I said, "Oh, yeah. Come on over." And, of course, what did I know I was getting into? But I had these rollerblades around for 5 years, and I tried making a plywood one, and it went around about 10 revolutions and just disintegrated. So I put them up and said, "We'll wait for another day." So long story short, I went down to Royal Metals. I said, "Give me your cutoffs, because I want to go scrounge up some metal." So the reason this is as heavy as it is, that's what they had in stock, and I had to cut it down and so forth. But if you read those plans, there's a lot of shortcuts you can take if you've got your welder handy. Now, if you don't, then you need all the centering holes and so forth to build it. So the neatest thing I saw was there's a platter rest, I guess we'd call it. This, you know, you can either take these off, whatever, but the mechanism here, your platter would ride against this when you're turning. So that was really the thing that I liked about it. And the other thing is if you can recess your bolts to get clamping on the lathe bed and all that. But the real key thing is, where is the middle? Well, the simplest way to figure that out, I modeled it all in SolidWorks and said, yeah, it's that big down, but I thought this is really a lot of work. Just take the center bar, make a center bar, and then drill a hole exactly in the center, about 3/8 of an inch. And then if you take your live center, turn your tailstock around, slide it over to the end, and then get your gear puller and grab the back of the live center and force that into the center hole. It just centers the whole thing up dead center right away. And all you got to do is come down here and take a pencil and scribe for the top of your bed. Simple as it can be. And then if you don't mind trying to start a fire, bring your welder over and just do a couple of little spot welds. And, you know, then you're all set to go weld it up. And so it was a lot of fun, and I did this in a lapsed day of about a day. So that was a lot of, you know, got a lot of fun out of it. And you make it the way you want to make it.
Question,
Yeah.
what's your lathe?
It's a 1640, and I made this with a 20-inch ring. I started with a 20, thinking about a 24. Well, I'd have had, you know, an enormous amount of bed rest if you made a big one. So ideally, I think 2 inches bigger than your throw gets all this stuff out of the way of anything you could possibly turn. So that's the
Question I asked was, can I borrow that? But I'm automatic.
well, you know, adaptation is the key, and I'm hoping I'll be able to use this on the outboard side. There's not a lot of space, you know, but there's times when that's when you really need it, is on the outboard side. So you have to build spacers and so on. But it was a heck of thank you, Rick. I enjoyed it.
So mine was too big, and so I just had pictures. This is the Harris 3000, and it's this is the first version of it. I used I-beams for the ways, and that thing on the left is a wooden box, and it's full of sand. Unfortunately, it rocks a little. I could get it to jump around some when I turn stuff on it. It's 10 feet long. It'll turn 30 inches. And the tailstock is when we were meeting at the Woodcraft. When we first met at Woodcraft with the club, I bought that and a headstock. It's from an old Egan lathe at the first auction we had at Woodcraft, and the bearings on the for the spindle on the headstock were poured lead. And they had little oil cups that you had to put the oil in, and so I ended up not using it and made this other one. But the tailstock's still a good heavy piece. It was a 16-inch, and so I had to put a significant riser under it.
This is the current model, or is that?
That's the first one. I made it 22 years ago or something. Yeah. And so this is that sphere. That's all. It was just in a Cerner's lobby. Let's try again. Do another one. Jack. Oh, you already did it. I apologize. This is the Harris 3000.7, and it has. You can see the legs around the box. They're 3/8 of an inch thick, and I don't remember if it's 3 or 4 inch angle iron. And so I went to Jay Nichols' house, and he helped me cut and weld those up. I changed out the I-beams for the square box rails. And the reason it turns out that I-beams aren't square, and I didn't know that, and the box isn't either, but it's a lot better. So let's do the next one. Yeah, there it is. And so this is the current Harris 3001, and it has, I guess I didn't say it, but the difference between this one and the other one was the other one used the wooden Jorgensen clamps to hold the tool rest holder against the ways. And I have fixed that now, so this is the full-fledged 3001. That front part, it just got all kinds of stuff to put little cubbies in. You can see the knockout rod on the far left, and there's chucks and stuff on the ways. This is from the front. It has a 1.5 inch 8 thread on the nose. It's a 1.5 horsepower. It only has 2 pulleys. It runs about, I think 1,200 RPM is as fast as it'll go. The headstock is made out of crossed members of I-beams, and the motor sits on a wooden sled, essentially, that fits down between the I-beams so that you can bring it in to loosen the belt and change it and push it back out to tighten it. It uses C-clamps to hold the wooden sled steady on the I-beam. That's all, isn't it?
Variable, but you have variable speed on it?
Yeah, it's a DC motor. Yeah. Say it again? It's absolutely OSHA approved, as long as they don't come visit. And so this is just from a slightly different angle. It's the same thing. I wanted to make a better picture of that, the thing the motor sits on. Yeah. Go ahead.
You don't really need much more than 1250 because you're turning big stuff anyway, right?
Well, I've turned a lot of little stuff on it too. I mean, for 12 years, it's all I had. I wanted a big lathe, and I couldn't find one anywhere that I liked that was less than like $8,000, and so I decided I'd have to build one. And this is looking from the other end. Legs are nice. The real failure that is still true of this lathe is the riser block under the tailstock. It's stacked, glued, screwed plywood, and it doesn't hold anything very true or very solid. And so if I ever go to a 3002, that'll be the change that gets made. Yes?
Is this an example? You had said one time that when you clean out under your lathe, because the lathe is getting too short.
Right.
Is this one here getting too short?
No, this isn't bad at all. No. I can endure a lot of pain. And so, and this is the way the tailstock, or the tail end of the lathe is put together. Each one of those boxes has 4 bolts in it, runs down into the piece of I-beam, and then I don't remember why I did that, but I made those legs out of the original stock that came with the lathe. The lathe originally had a wooden bed, and so those are made out of the original wooden bed. I don't have it now, but I frequently put a couple 100 pounds of sand on the end, because even if you have the front steady, the back end can still flop around if you're turning something big. The whole thing weighs 1,500 pounds.
What's the biggest thing you've ever turned on this?
I have a bowl that turned out 28 inches, and now maybe it's only 27 and a half. And the problem with it was when you turned it fast, when you're mostly done and you're turning it fast, it expanded, and so it was slapping the bed. Yeah. So.
Can you send me a set of plans tomorrow?
No, I can't. And it's kind of interesting because it's the way I do things, right? I didn't really design this before I built it. I just had these vague ideas of what I was going to do. So it works.
This was a little jig that Virgil, he's already left, I think, but he told me when I was doing the little jewelry pieces like this, I was constantly trying to figure out where my holes lined up, and I was using tape on a faceplate to turn them. And he told me, create a jig that has 2 holes for your worm screw, and in order for depth, I have another block. So the chuck holds on and pushes up against this, holds this all flat, and then you just unscrew this and change holes, and that gives you your distance between where it's on center here and on center here, and you don't have to move your piece until you flip it over, if you do flip it over. So it was just a quick little jig that came in handy and worked real well for what I was needing.
All right, everybody has such complicated things. I came up with a hanger depth gauge. So I just took the hanger, drilled a hole through it, put a nut in here, and did it. And then the other thing is when I put on a faceplate, I can mark the hole that's in the center, but then trying to get the faceplate down perfectly, so then I made a little jig, put that there. And then that way I can just stick it in the hole and then tighten it down and then put in my screws for the faceplate. So it works well for me.
Any more challenge contestants? Okay, so everybody got a ticket. We now need, who should we have draw? Dan. What are the last three numbers on that ticket? 822. 822. For it to actually count in the check, don't you have to bring the item in?
Just give me a picture of whatever, right?
Thank you. Congratulations. And then we need the new tool. Okay, show and tell. We got some real interesting items here. Who's going to go first? And quickly, we got 9 minutes.
This is what happens at my house when it snows too much and you have all that time with nothing else to do. So it's a piece of maple. The pattern was drawn on it and then burned around the edge of the pattern, textured, and then airbrushed. And there's wine inside. I hauled it from the top.
Oh, well, since Saturday's always something else, I had to make a snowman box because I had enough snow outside. And then for my sister, who likes to sew, I decided to make a button box.
We had a guy at the Independence Club that donated this piece of wood. It had, there we go, had, of course, this area here, only it came straight back and squared off back here somewhere, probably another 4 to 6 inches of material on the back side of it. He said he didn't know what to do with it, and so I picked it up in the raffle. And 4 or 5 years later, I finally figured out what to do with it. But my wife seems to like it, and the green in it was just incredible.
So the other day I saw a video on on some show about bleeding trees, and while I was in South Africa, there was a piece of a tree laying on the side of the road, and so I had to have it, so I went and started cutting into it, and as you can see the dark areas, this was a bleeding tree. And Jack's got a video on YouTube, and if you don't have time to watch it, just look on YouTube for bleeding tree, and there's a Chinese thing, and it really looks like the tree is bleeding, but it obviously darkens to a nice brown color. But
And you brought the wood back from South Africa?
South Africa, yep, legally.
You didn't, I was going to say you didn't.
All right, for starters, this was all scrap wood, finished in tug oil. The others, somebody gave me a box full of these. I mean, what can you do with these? Obviously, you got to segment them. Yeah, there's still lots left. The reason I brought 4 of them is because each segment, where everything's glued together, I dyed them in between. Black, green, blue, and red. Let the dye dry overnight and used Tight Bond 2 to glue it all together. And when I finished it, I put a couple of coats of epoxy on it, and with the epoxy I put a little bit of metallic or pearlescent pigments to give it a little color. And each one looks different, but it's the same wood, just done differently.
Got a candlestick. The bowl was made out of a piece of crotchwood that I'd slabbed up, and it has a natural edge where one piece was growing out of the other, but it didn't have proper bark on it. And so all I was going to get out of it was one. These usually come in more than one, and usually at least a pair, but all I was going to get out of this was one piece, so I have to look around, try to find another piece of crotchwood.
These were my, in the latest issue of AAW magazine, they did multi-axis turning. And what it does, you start in the center and you round the bowl, and then you offset it, and they offset it 1 inch each way. And however you offset it will determine which way your handles are. And so the biggest thing is the guy, the article, the pictures in the article, his handles looked a lot bigger than these do. And I couldn't figure out I did it exactly how he told you to do it. And it's still, I don't know whether I'm turning it too far or whether it's just, so I've got another blank on the lathe now that I moved it, instead of 1 inch offset, I went 1 3/8 inches, and I was going to see how the handles turn out on it. But you offset something 1 inch. And what they do, the drive center goes into, you drill holes that's the same size, same outside diameter as your live center, and then it can't move off, it can't walk away from you. It gives you a solid fix. And then now I'm going to use a bigger cone on my tailstock, so because it wasn't engaging a whole lot. Right. what I do, I mount it, put the life center in, and then you drill the hole, and I put a drill bit in my headstock, and then I know where my center is, and then I use the quill to advance it into the drill bit. And you go just deep enough that because basically you're drilling the holes on this side, and then you turn, so the dry center's over here, and it's weird because you're turning and you're only cutting about that much each pass because it's offset.
This is my wife's Christmas present for this past Christmas, and she had this, and she said, "Can you make me a chip and salsa platter?" And I remember chip and salsa. Somebody demonstrated that, and I didn't pay any attention. I know it was Stuart. So anyway, I told Stuart that I'd bring it in this month for show and tell. But basically, chips and salsa on this side, or hummus and pita bread, or some kind of dip or something. And then what I did is on the other side, this is your meats and cheeses on the flat side, or you can have pizza. You know, you could have like an 18-inch pizza, but just don't use that pizza cutter. I don't want this. It's just a walnut oil. Yeah, it's the not Mahoney's. It's the other one. But anyway, it turned out pretty good. I bought the piece of wood over at Metro. Oh, and then I did turn that big pine cone over there, the epoxy pine cone, and the story on the pine cone is we found that pine cone when I was 12 years old. So that pine cone is very old. It's set on my parents' fireplace for 48 years. And so anyway, it's the largest pine cone there is. And it grows up between L.A. and San Francisco. And that is a Coulter pine cone, otherwise known as a widowmaker, because they get about this big, and when those things fall, you do not want to get hit. Yeah, when I poured it, when I cast it, yes, if we just rounded it off to like $1 an ounce, just think. I mean, a pound that's a nice prime New York steak, So you have to be real, but I did that all in one pour, and I did end up with some cracks on the bottom of it, and that's why I had to borrow Lambie's Steady Rest, because I had so much money in that thing. I did not want that to, break off as I'm hollow turning the inside, and it turned out.
Always wanted to do something artsy, and I don't know if this is or is not. I can't make the difference. But at any rate, the Northlanders bought a bunch of walnut wood, and this is a piece of what they bought, and this was a nice 6x6. And so I had to look at this thing for a couple of years to see what I was going to do with it, because 6x6 walnut pieces, a little costly. So anyway, this is what I did with it. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's art, I don't know. But I had fun doing it anyway.
This little stink pretty jar I made for my wife. It's for potpourri. It's got little holes in the top. The grain doesn't match up. The shine is not very good. But this is the best thing I've ever made. I first learned to turn the tenon, put it on the chuck. Next thing I learned was how to hollow out something. Third thing I learned was how to make a lid. So it may not be very pretty, but I'm very proud.
This was a nice piece of, it was the top of a really nice piece of burled elm. I turned the bowl and I turned the lid, didn't have a finial, looked like a pumpkin, didn't know what to do. Then I remembered Chip talking about the, I don't know, pigtail, that it was basically a spiral that you cut away one side. This is my first attempt, did some dyeing on it. Didn't really care for it too much until that, and I just thought that was fun. That was cool. So I was real happy with that. These two pieces were to be, I missed last month's meeting, and these were to be my eccentric pieces for Anthony's demo on the lattice work. Love this. It was 6 pieces that were all done the exact same way, circles on one side and then offset circles on the other side. And then I was like, I wanted to put them together as a box, but they were all the same size. So then I had to figure out how to make rails for the sides and get them all glued up. Turned a little round to square stand that it sets on and cut some grooves, and was just ecstatic with the way it turned out. So. Oh, and did make a hinged lid on it, and had to think that through, because I actually turned the tenons that go through the holes there to make that. So just happy it all came together.
How'd you do that pigtail again?
So Chip showed us how to do the spirals. It's a two spirals going up, and then one of the spirals you just cut away. I took the Dremel and just cut it away until you have the other spiral is what you're kind of leaving.
This piece I've titled The Cradle. Since when I posted it on the internet, somebody said, that ought to really go good for people who take pictures of newborns. I thought, okay, it's what you like. But Dorothy and I had a little excursion before Christmas. We went down to the plaza on a ad from Craigslist that said, free walnut firewood, black walnut. And so we thought, well, that might be worthwhile. So we get there. This has been on the ground for 5 years. It's 30 inches to 38 inches in diameter, and it is wormy. It is a little bit punky, but there's good pieces in it, you know. So you said, yeah, we'll just give it a shot. So I went home, and this was about an inch longer, but it was about this wide. So I said, what are you going to make out of that? Well, this is what I made out of it, and it is black walnut, and it got turned a couple of times, to say the least, and it was turned as you see it. So carefully, hoping that, you know, centrifugal force and mechanicals would hold together. And then I thought about, you know, what to do for handles. You know, I figured you're going to have something to hold it in. So these come from a bowl that I made that was 20-some inches. And I took the coring tool that I have, and I cored the outer edge of the bowl so I didn't have to turn off all that excess wood. And I looked at that and held it up, and I said, those are really pretty close. So put a little walnut space in there to hold it apart, and sure enough, the walnut was similar, not identical, and it's got tung oil finish. So I'm really happy with how it, and Dorothy's had everything in the house in there for decoration. You know, we got a glass sphere and a red glass this. So this is kind of her thing to decorate. But
okay, any other show and tell items? Okay. Oh, 7 minutes late. I tell you, one thing we did overlook